This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 370, entitled Biconscious Masculists Have Little Patience with Monoconscious Feminists. This is part 2. Carrying straight on. In my own case, both my brother and my sister have been what the MGTOWs call divorce raped. That is, where one of the divorcing partner gets half of the total wealth of the couple, even if one of the partners made much less effort to become career competent and earned far less than half of that total wealth. My brother ended up giving one of his ex-wives several $1 million, simply due to the fact that she was married to him. More recently, a similar situation has occurred to my sister, who made hugely more than half of the wealth of the marriage she was in. Her ex-husband walked away with millions, money that he did not earn, simply because he was married to my financially very successful sister. This kind of thing sucks and needs to be done away with, which is one of the major aims of the Masculists, that is, the fipping of women, forcing all women to become career competent so that they can be real fips as adults, not being hated, in brackets by Masculists, fluffy parasites, expecting to live off the labour of a man, a gullible man-slave who works for her. In the eyes of the Masculists, women oppress men far worse than vice versa, because women's oppression is continuous and so sustained, in capital letters, lasting decades. A fluffy sexploits her husband for decades. She lives off his money, his labour, his effort for decades. This massive sexploitation by women of men is hugely worse a gender crime than what the feminists are talking about. Masculists talk about manslavery as slavery. To Masculists, manslavery is a major gender crime. It rouses passions, the way Negro slavery roused passions in the 1800s. The US Civil War was largely over the issue of slavery. Masculists will eventually kill fluffies who don't fip up, seeing them as manslavers, as vermin to be wiped out. The northern states of the US in the Civil War were fighting largely for the abolition of Negro slavery. They were abolitionists. So too are Masculists in the 2000s. The abolitionists saw Negro slavery as a moral abomination. The Masculists see manslavery as a moral abomination. Both are forms of slavery, that is, one group of people working without pay for another group. Look at the Japs and Koreans, where sex roles are decades behind the West. In Japan, quote, "The husbands overwork and the wives play tennis." The Japs and Koreans are gender role retards. As millions of men become increasingly angry and hateful at what the fluffy feminist hypocrites are doing to men, to fathers in the divorce courts, then once they have their masculist consciousnesses raised, they will very understandably have very little patience with monoconscious feminists who lash out at men for the way men oppress women, but are oblivious to how much worse, far worse, that women oppress men. Look at the fact that one father in 4 is financially massacred in the fluffy feminist-controlled divorce court system. Masculists are painfully aware that the casualty rate of men in the divorce courts is, in capital letters, far worse than in a major war. Hence the level of hatred coming from men, from the Masculists and MGTOWs against the fluffy feminists in all their hypocrisy. It's bad enough that these feminists are fluffies in all their financial parasitism of men. They're not bothering to fip up, become career competent by getting a career competent education at high school and college, so that they can share the burden of earning the living with a man, and not expect fluffy style to parasite off him, manslave him, destroy his life. But they're also hypocrites because they behave as feminists in the parliaments but as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts, wanting equal rights for women but rejecting equal obligations for women, by rejecting the idea that women have a moral duty to fip up and not manslave a man. So you can understand the growing frustration and contempt that masculists show towards monoconscious feminists, when these feminists, for example, lash out at men in public in all their monoconscious, misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi bitchery. Soon, there'll be enough biconscious masculists in the audience that these monoconscious feminists will not dare dump on men in public again, because they will risk being violently harangued by a biconscious masculist hatred of the level of gender political ignorance of these monoconscious feminists. Such biconscious masculists will be hurling such remarks as, "You women oppress men far worse than men oppress women. Most of you women are still fluffy parasites who expect men to work for you for decades. You fluffy feminists are sexist hypocrites and are hated by the masculists, who see you as indirect genociders who have to be wiped out before you indirectly wipe out whole populations due to your takeover of the divorce courts, making divorce so toxic for men that 2/3 of them now refuse to marry and have kids. You vile monoconscious feminazi bigots," that's MFB, "are not only hated by the masculists for your monoconsciousness, but you are far more hated for being indirect genociders. If the gender laws are not soon man-fared, for example, the divorce courts are man-fared, and the that's paternity rejection right, is legislated, etc., then in the limit, masculist soldiers will simply go out into the street and shoot you feminazi vermin, because responsible males, in capital letters, will not tolerate that you burnable feminazi witches wipe out whole populations, which is what you are currently doing. You have to be stopped in a sex war with bullets." Of course, the more benign approach is to employ masculist science to destroy most of what the third-wave feminists are preaching, rather than teaching, to society. For example, that women are men's equals, which science shows is not true, given that men are smarter than women on average by 4 IQ points. Men have a 10% larger IQ variance, so that the morons and the genii are males, so men win 99% of the science Nobel Prizes. Men have 10% larger brains, so it's not surprising that men build everything, invent everything, create everything. Men are the superior sex for genetic reasons, so the monoconscious feminists' push for the removal of the patriarchy, that is, general male dominance, is misguided, given that it is genetically caused, given the above, plus the fact of women's hypergamy, that is, women's evolved instinct to mate up with superior men of higher intelligence, so that these men's superior DNA would be given to her kids, so that her kids would have superior DNA to hers, which is obviously good for the species, so it was inherited. Smarter men also made better hunters, so were more sexploitable by women. Thus women were largely responsible for the very creation of the patriarchy, an idea that flies in the face of what the monoconscious third-wave feminists are preaching, that is, the real empowerment of women, by bringing in quotas so that women occupy half of the prime ministerships and presidencies, half of the seats on company boardrooms, etc. Pretty soon, monoconscious feminists will be getting used to being gender politically harangued out of the room if they bash men in public. Biconscious masculists will have no patience with such feminazi monoconscious ignorance and will cut such a feminist to pieces. This will be a very unpleasant experience for her, so probably she will be motivated to learn some masculism so that she understands why these masculists in the audience are so incredibly angry and hateful at her. She'll be asking herself,
what is the source of this incredible masculist hatred of me? Why are they calling me monoconscious? What the hell are they talking about? What does MFB stand for? Why are they saying that men's oppression of women is small beer, small potatoes, compared to how women oppress men? Such a claim sounds farcical to me. Don't these masculists in the audience know any feminism? How can they claim that men oppress women far worse than vice versa? But they sound so convinced, so angry, so hateful. Some of them even claimed I was a genocider, wiping out whole populations. What the fuck? What the hell are these masculists talking about? I don't understand. Maybe I should watch some masculist videos so I can at least know my enemy. But one thing is for sure, the experience of being harangued collectively by very angry men was scary, to say the least. I probably won't be dumping on men in public again. So I fear that there may be more masculists in the audience who will attack me with these monstrous claims. What the hell are these masculists talking about?
Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 370 masculist flyers for men's studies courses, free downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.